Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the AIM Growth Partners podcast. Today, I am joined by Jordan Schroeder, the Managing Director and CISO of ARXA Cyber. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to talk with you today. My name is Jordan Schroeder. I have been involved in information security and cybersecurity for most of my life. I was hacking computers in my parents' basement in the mid-'80s. Although I've done so many other things and had been involved in so many other types of businesses and careers, I always keep coming back to information security and cybersecurity. So I have a very broad experience across 3 different countries: Canada, where I'm from, the United States, and now the UK. I've been here for almost 10 years. And so with that, I utilize and I leverage that experience as things change and as the cyber landscape is in constant flux and in turmoil. I use all of that to build that on that experience in order to address what's coming down the pipe. And so that's one of the reasons why I've started ARXA, is to really leverage as much of my experience and knowledge base as I can. But I have been a security manager for a software as a service startup. I have worked in a large major bank here in the UK. I have the experience being the shared CISO across 32 organizations simultaneously. And that was an insane challenge. I loved every minute of it. I eventually had to break that up and get other CISOs to come in and help me out with that one. But I developed a process to create that virtual CISO program so that large organizations could then benefit from a very similar approach, a very common approach across the board. And then I worked for an MSP and a value-added reseller doing virtual CISO as well as CISO advisory assessments across multiple different industries. So I have huge experience in that. I've also had the privilege of working with the Scottish Government and their National Cyber Resiliency Advisory Board. I've just been invited to start a second term with them, which I'm very delighted about, as well as working closely with the CRU and the SC3 and other Scottish organizations, and helping them define and implement their cybersecurity strategy at a national level. So I've been very, very privileged and honored to be able to help those organizations out on that. And that is the very fast introduction to my cybersecurity background. And yeah, I'm delighted to be where I am, starting another business, first one in the UK, focused on cybersecurity and helping out more and more people and more organizations throughout the UK.
Brilliant. Well, what an introduction, first of all. Talk to me around all of that experience you've gained. What is it you're building at ARXA Cyber?
At ARXA, I have a very unique vision, and that is helping out managed service providers. IT managed service providers have, as I've discovered, I've worked in one for about 4.5 years, worked with a lot of other MSPs, and the common thread is that they are alone. If they are doing cybersecurity, they have to rely on themselves and themselves alone in order to secure themselves and to have that expertise to secure their customers. And the way to do that, whenever they are having a lack or they're having a gap, is to somehow hire more people to come into that and provide that expertise. This, of course, creates its own issues. And so what every other organization in everywhere else, what they can do is just simply tap into an MSP in order to get that knowledge and that skill set that they need to secure themselves. But an MSP doesn't have that luxury because they would have to call upon their competitors. And there aren't a lot of MSPs. And I've asked about this. Well, why don't we just, steel ourselves against that risk and, ask one of the competitors? And when you're dealing with cybersecurity is deeply embedded into the operations and the culture and the people of the organization. So when you're assessing cybersecurity, you're not just assessing a firewall, you're not just assessing a technical tool. To do it well, you need to assess the organization. And that's not something that a company is going to want to expose so blatant, so barely, right? In such an unfiltered way to a competitor. So what they need, as I was talking to MSPs, what they were needing is someone they could trust, an MSP that they could trust who isn't a competitor, who is going to be okay with whatever they find, to be able to trust them, to give them that advice, to be able to provide that level of expertise and to provide that very frank assessment to say, these are the things that you need to fix in order to improve your security posture. So that's one of the things I wanted to do in ARXA, is to do this. Now, I have not found another in the UK, or anywhere else for that matter, but I haven't found anyone else in the UK doing that, where they're focused on MSPs and their cybersecurity. And so one of the other things I wanted to do with my virtual CISO background is to offer a white labeled virtual CISO offering for the MSPs so that they could serve their customers where they need this. So they're not having to hire security professionals at the senior level in order to provide the service to their customers. And that way they can keep that relationship, that existing relationship they have with their customer, and not have to farm that out to potentially their competitors as well. So this is what I wanted to provide with in ARXA. And as far as I'm aware, and if anyone knows of anybody else doing this, please let me know, because I'd love to chat with them, I don't think there's anyone else doing this where they're focused on supporting the MSPs to secure themselves and their customers.
And presumably from your experience as a virtual CISO or working as a CISO across those 32 organizations, you've probably managed to create a very sort of templatized, systematized way of delivering these services. So talk a bit about this templatized approach.
So different customers and different companies who want or need a virtual CISO, there is a spectrum of their needs and their expectations. And some customers literally just want an expert to come in without much of an agenda, without much of a plan, and say, hey, look, we either have a plan, or we're too small or we're too dynamic for a plan. We just need you to come in and let's have regular meetings, and we'll just hash things out in every meeting, right? And for those customers, that's really easy. That's really, really simple to work with them, because you have no clue what's going to happen. You show up in that whatever that meeting is that week, and you deal with the issue of the day, right? And there's that way of doing it. But that is a very small number of organizations who work that way. A lot of organizations want to have an understanding of what they're going to get over time, right? What improvements they're going to get, how that plan and how that program is going to go. So one of the things that I did when I was the CISO for over a couple dozen organizations, almost 3 dozen organizations, was really template that out to look at the different areas of cybersecurity that are most critical, and then work out that plan and that framework that we're going to check these things, and we're going to be managing a set number of things to get them to a certain level of protection and effectiveness. And we're going to go through that process to make sure they're up to the acceptable threshold, make sure that they are then being executed properly and consistently, and making sure they're doing what they're doing. And then after this core is done, then we're going to go back and take a look at new controls to see how we can continue to improve security posture and reduce our risk by taking a look at the next suite of controls, and do basically that same process until the security program matures and grows and creates a better situation for that organization. And that's the core of the idea that I have whenever I'm building a virtual CISO program, is having an understanding of what those key or those core controls are for that organization. Address those first, address them, especially if they're key risks. Make sure we tackle them as quickly as possible, right? But then make sure that it's templated, because one of the things that most of my clients run into, and it doesn't matter what industry it is or how big they are, it's the lack of doers, right? And this was the challenge that I had for a long time, and I really struggled to come up with a way to solve this. And how I've approached this that works really well for most organizations is coming up with a standard operating procedure to say, we need to check our firewall rules, right? We need to check our firewall rules, let's say every quarter. We don't need to do it every day, every week. Once a year is probably too much. Let's take a look at it every quarter. And then we create a standard operating procedure that this is what needs to happen every quarter. And there is a predefined process. It's very clear as to what to do, where to look, what you need to be checking, and then what you're supposed to do with that information. Often for that, it would typically be sort of a sign off and making sure that everything is clarified, and then that gathered in a central location. And so once you reduce your security program and a couple hundred things that you typically need to do in a security program, once you reduce that down into a standard operating procedure, it's not so daunting, right? And it's a lot easier for then to time box. And my recommendation for a lot of organizations is to time box. Let's give it 45 minutes every day to take a look to see what the standard operating procedure is that is scheduled for that day. It's the new quarter. We need to look at the firewall rules now and go through that process. And that helps to solve that lack of hands problem, because people aren't having to invent it as they go. It's very clear as to what they need to do. And once you do that, then becomes an intriguing and an interesting idea to look to automate those processes as necessary. A lot of that will take extra investment for a lot of organizations, but it doesn't need to go that far if you don't want to. I highly encourage automation as much as possible for consistency and repeatability. But if you have that procedure all written down, it's a lot easier for someone to just go through the process line by line by line, make sure you get what you need at the end, send that off to the central repository, and then when it comes to a management perspective, which is typically what I would do as a CISO, is take a look at all of this information coming in, making sure things are being done properly on time, and any problems that have been highlighted are then raised in action. So by really templating down as much as is possible, and not everything can be, but as much as is possible, really get that smooth running security program. And you also reduce the load on your security people and realize, hey, if we can time box half hour, 45 minutes every day, we can actually have an incredibly strong and mature security program. If you can do that, then things get a lot easier for everybody.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I guess one of the things that towards the end there, where you mentioned about really templatizing down, making it as simple as possible, led me to kind of thinking security is, we need to think about the people in the situation and the kind of human risk as well. So I guess, what work do you do in terms of enabling and building that kind of security culture? Because I guess if you've really reduced and boiled down the key principles, almost for want of a better phrase, an instruction manual that makes it easy for businesses to understand what they need to be doing, how do you go about building that culture around it of adherence to these sort of frameworks and instructions?
So this is a big question, and I'm also an expert in human factors and security culture engineering. So this is big. Again, this could be its own whole podcast. When you're looking at the security culture, you want to understand what the people are thinking about, how they feel about IT in general, and then how they feel about cybersecurity. T is the core enabler for most businesses, but in a lot of businesses, it's not seen that way. IT is an impediment. It's a barrier. It's an annoyance. I just want to do my work. And computers and the technology we use now tends to get invisible. People tend to forget that, oh yeah, but I'm doing all my work on a computer, right? And I'm using a network to do that. And I'm using the internet and to do that. And so a lot of that, for a lot of people, that gets lost in the shuffle. And then cybersecurity then is an added annoyance to the annoyance of their IT that they have to deal with, or whatever the inefficiencies or the things they don't like about the IT that pop up. So the more you can identify and get people to express what it is that they're feeling about IT and what it is they're feeling about cybersecurity, and you can then start addressing those things and start reframing both IT and cybersecurity for those people in a way that is beneficial to them. I was working for one company and was having a really hard time getting them to do their security awareness modules and security awareness training. This is a problem for most organizations, right? And they just didn't want to do it. They were super busy. They were very distracted with their day jobs, and they didn't want to do this. And so I had an opportunity to call this entire department together. And this was over 50 people in this one department. And they were legitimately busy department. There's no doubt there. And I was thinking about it. How can I get them on board? How can I turn them from resistors to cybersecurity and doing this training to being champions? How can I get them to really, really want to do the training? How do I flip that in their head? And so I came up with this thought, and it worked really, really well. This was an insurance company. And this was part of the claims department. This was one part of their claims department. This was for automotive claims. So they were people on the phone all day long talking to people who've typically been in an accident, right? So I walked in and I said, you are busy all day long talking with people that are stressed and injured and upset and despondent, and you are talking to these people on what might be the worst day of their life, right? Let's not make that day worse by mishandling their information and mishandling their claims in such a way that it causes a cybersecurity incident, their information gets breached, and things get even worse for them. Let's protect them by doing the things that we need to do within the security awareness and that training. And for them, for that group, that flipped it for them because they were very, very passionate advocates for the insured, right? They're very passionate about helping these people. And then once I framed it in a way where it was helping them do their jobs and preventing them from causing a problem for these people that they're helping, they became my most ardent champions for doing cybersecurity within the company because they got it, right? They understood this wasn't just I have to go do this training, right? This is now, this is helping me do my job, right? And in terms of that culture, that's one of the things it's a switch that needs to be flipped. It's not something coming down from on high saying, thou shalt do this and thou shalt do that. But cybersecurity has a real effect. It has a real impact if cybersecurity is designed properly. It has a real material impact on how the business runs and how people do their jobs. So if you can tie into that and show that and reframe both IT and cybersecurity as an enabler, and we say this all the time, cybersecurity is a business enabler. But if you can make that real for those people, the culture changes, their engagement changes. Instead of becoming resistors, they become champions, right? And that's what I typically want to be able to do for every organization. It's not something they have to do, it's something they get to do.
I find that fascinating, actually hearing a real world example of that, because to your point, it's something people talk about so much in the cyber community. And, with the recent kind of hacks and attacks in the UK, people can see from a dollar or a pound amount what the costs of some of these sort of ransomware and cyber attacks are. But for those not in maybe the finance department or maybe sales that actually think about generating revenue versus people that aren't dealing with numbers, those numbers don't really mean much. But to your point in your example there, the people that are frontline on the phones who do care about the customer experience and are intrinsically motivated towards offering a good customer experience, reframing, cyber as an enabler for you doing your job better. It's like, being a waiter or a waitress of like delivering the food, doing this, doing that, but not offering them a good day at the end of it, or, forgetting the cutlery, something so basic like that of why don't we put the cutlery down first so that they can enjoy their food as soon as it lands on the silly little things like that, thinking, well, I'm already enjoying delighting customers. How can I bake cybersecurity in as an enabler? And it sounds like that's what you've done. That's what you essentially enable then.
And that's exactly right. And I would say, like for the waiter analogy, it's not just the user experience of making sure the place is set, but let's have some basic understanding of food safety so that we're not infecting all of my customers all day long, right? With how I'm handling. And if I just change how I handle things better, if I change the order that I do things, now I'm protecting my patrons, I'm protecting my diners, as opposed to being, the typhoid Mary and making everyone sick.
Why do you think there's such a disconnect and such a challenge that exists in cybersecurity and probably IT more generally? Because to your point there, and I used kind of waiting or waitressing as an example, it made me think about the amount of food, health, and safety things I've done in the past, but I didn't, call that up as an obvious example. So why do you think there's such a disconnect and an inability of technical teams, whether it's IT or cybersecurity, to actually be able to translate business outcomes in a way that, does make sense? Because it does seem to be such a problem within the industry.
It is, and it's been a problem for a long time. And the problem with cybersecurity is there's a few factors here. One, it's invisible, right? You can't see it. You can't see what's happening. You can't see its effect. It only has these knock-on effects. And although you can map in retrospect how things worked, it's difficult to see it while it's in place. So it's invisible. The other thing is cybersecurity is exceedingly complex. It's highly technical. It's really, really complex. There's lots of different moving pieces. There's 100,000 moving pieces in play that contribute to cybersecurity. And then the other thing that that also impacts this and makes this very, very difficult is that cybersecurity is constantly changing. So, and it's not always changing where you're losing things. Things just keep getting added on. New threats, new problems, new approaches, new things keep getting added on. And I've said this for a while, and this phrase I've used for a really long time. The volume and the complexity and the sophistication of cyber attacks is only increasing, and there is no evidence that it's going to slow down. Right? It's only going to get worse, and it's going to get faster, more complex, and more sophisticated over time. So you end up with some people start to feel the sense of despondency. There is no solution. We can't do anything about it. So we're just going to give up our hands. We're not going to worry about it. Or when dealing with business leaders, it can be what? There's a new problem? Well, haven't we fixed cybersecurity yet? I mean, this new problem shouldn't affect us because we just invested, £500,000 last year for a security program, and now you want more because now this new thing. What happened to that other £500,000? That should have prevented it, right? So there's this. It's highly complex. It's constantly changing, and getting the changes that both in terms of security and protection and threats, they're speeding up, not slowing down at all. And it's invisible, right? So it can be a really tough challenge. And that's why things like companies talking about their cybersecurity impacts, talking about their incidents is so important. Some countries are forcing organizations to talk about their cybersecurity incidents because the rest of the community, the rest of the society needs to hear it. They need to understand that it's real and there are things that happened which could have been prevented or at least predicted to help reduce the impact of what actually happened. So this becomes really important. So the news that comes out, Marks and Spencer's in the UK very recently, you've got Co-op, you've got Harrods, you've got Jaguar Land Rover right now currently in the news. These are horrible things that happened, right? And we certainly don't celebrate whenever there has been a huge impact like this because there's lives impacted by each of these events. But it also helps us to keep it top of mind that even though these are invisible, they are real. We do need to keep ahead of them. And most importantly, there are things we can do to lower that risk. We can't eliminate it, but we can lower it down to a point where it's more acceptable. And we can start criticizing the recent attacks and what they could have done to reduce their risks. I'm not going there. But the fact is there are things that can be done for every organization. And that should provide a little bit of hope.
So looking at things that can be done then, I want to kind of get your insights as to what this cyber resiliency bill means for businesses in terms of how they're prioritizing cyber. But then I guess looking at MSPs specifically, what does it mean for them?
So we don't have the wording of the bill yet. We do have the policy statements and we have the understanding of the focus of the UK government and what they want to achieve. And at least that policy level understanding of what it is that they want to see. Having your government invest focus and thought and requirements for organizations and people within the country to take cybersecurity seriously is generally a good thing, right? It's just a good thing. It's a good thing this is happening. We can debate the wording of the bill as it comes out and look at all those other things, and that's going to be its own issue. But having this level of investment and thought in cybersecurity is a good thing because this is a real problem with real things we can do to fix this. They do lay out a variety of different things that they are promoting as ways to reduce risk. And one of the things that you're talking about your dual-pronged, it's actually quite connected. And then one of the things that they're focused on are managed service providers. They want to encourage, force, regulate. They want managed service providers to be more secure because managed service providers become that backbone for multiple different organizations at once. Right. So if you have a weakness, a cybersecurity weakness in that backbone, then it affects everybody else. Right. So with more and more organizations relying on managed service providers to provide their IT and cybersecurity, then this is actually a way to leverage the government's focus and thought and investment to make sure that the rest of society is broadly protected. So I think this is a really cool idea to do this. For MSPs, this presents challenges and opportunities, right? What was it? Is it a Chinese word? The word for danger is opportunity, something like that. Don't quote me on that one. MSPs have a great opportunity here. In the policy statement, the government has outlined that they are going to use the NCSC's Cyber Assessment Framework, the CAF, as a means to measure how secure these organizations ought to be. Right. And the CAF is great. I've worked with the CAF for years. I've worked with multiple different clients who deal with the CAF. And there's always things I can critique. On the whole, I think it's very good. For an MSP, if you read between the lines in the policy statement, it appears you can conclude that they're focused mostly on the medium-sized and large-sized MSPs for this regulation. It's not a big surprise because you don't want to force regulation on small organizations because it's going to increase their costs and they might not have the skills or the abilities to handle that or do that. Okay, fine, no problem. For the medium to large organizations, and if you look at the policy statement and the supporting documents, there's 11,500 MSPs in the UK, 3,000 offering cybersecurity. And if you take a look at the medium sized MSPs, they're looking at around, if I remember the numbers, something between 900 and 1,100 medium-sized MSPs. So all of these are going to get regulated, or at least going to get guidance. They're going to get regulated. They're going to have some controls on this. So this is a good thing for the customers, right? Because it forces the MSPs to get more secure, meet a standard level of security and control, and that's just going to have these ripple effects for the rest of society. And the CAF goes beyond things like the 27,001 and some of these other very, very common security frameworks and it does it in I think, good ways. Here's the thing. For those small MSPs, those under 50 people, headcount of 50, if the policy statement, if we can interpret that policy statement correctly, that the small and micro MSPs aren't going to be affected by this. This is both a good thing and a bad thing. The small MSP doesn't have to deal with the costs and the effort to try to be compliant with the CAF. So a lot of MSPs might think that they've dodged a bullet and they don't have to worry with this anymore. Here's the danger that I'm seeing. I'm seeing this as a very real danger. If the medium MSPs are forced to be compliant and the smaller ones are not, the smaller ones are already, right now, competing with the medium-sized MSPs for services and customers and the level of in-depth of the services and expertise. By having the medium MSPs now compliant with the CAF, this widens that gap. Because now the smaller ones can't necessarily prove or show or be within that group, which is secured to the same amount. So I see this as a potential huge problem for smaller MSPs because they're going to have to somehow prove, they're going to have to catch up to their larger competitors. And I see this as a potential existential risk. And so for these MSPs, my encouragement has been to start looking at the CAF and start assessing yourselves and start looking to see where your gaps are and start creating that plan for what you're going to have to do to solve those gaps. Because you might not be forced to solve those gaps by the government. You might be. And there's some debate as to whether or not smaller or MSPs might also be pulled in depending upon what you're actually doing for clients. That's also a factor. But even if you're not forced to, my guess is you're going to want to. You're going to have to, you're going to have to choose to do it just to be on the same level playing field as your larger competitors so that you can show your customers, provide that assurance to them, and that continue to build that trust with them that you are as secure as you need to be. And as you're winning new clients and as you're providing more services, as you're designing more services and trying to build and grow more clients, that you're not in the dark, you're not left in the dust from your larger competitors simply because of this external regulation as well. So this is a big problem that I see that I don't think people are talking about enough. Or they're not seeing that problem. I've talked to MSPs and I was like, have you assessed yourself against the CAF? And they're going, no, we don't need to. We're too small. I'm like, actually, you might be too small to be forced to. You want to, because you are not going to be able to compete with the people who are forced to be compliant. And so it's something that I think every small MSP needs to keep top of mind right.
And I think that's fascinating. And I got so many questions off the back of that. But I guess first things first, through having these conversations with the smaller and the micro kind of MSPs, what's the general consensus? Are people, first of all, thinking about it? Oh, this is a great thing. We've got the agility and we've got the free reign, but we're not getting bogged down by this expensive cost and time consuming issue? Or are people kind of waking up more to the doomsday? This is bad for us. We need it anyway. What's your take, and what are you hearing?
Well, when you're dealing with small and micro MSPs, you're dealing with entrepreneurs at their finest, right? You're dealing with small business owners who are really good at one thing, and that's only doing what's necessary to build a business and nothing more. Right. So for most of the MSP leaders I'm talking to, I'm right now planting the seeds. I'm not seeing anyone yet saying, oh my gosh, we need to start tackling this right away. So for me, I'm in this seed planting perspective and trying to provide as much support I can so that it's low touch and it's not a distraction. But it is something that I believe that they do need to keep top of mind and start working towards, even in a small way, in whatever way is possible, whatever they have the capacity to tackle, because I do believe they're going to need to do it. It's not, I mean, the bill's not out yet, right? So it's not here yet, but wouldn't you rather be able to tackle all this when you have the time and the resources to do it than when you're forced to later on? And even if it turns out to not be a problem, which I can't imagine, if it turns out not to be a problem, isn't it great that you had an opportunity to assess yourself against the CAF anyway and know where some of your gaps are? So it's a good idea all round, but I'm not seeing anyone that's panicking yet, mostly because of the nature of the people that I'm talking to. And they're not going to panic until it's right in their face. And that's what makes them wonderful. It's what makes them very agile. It's what makes them very, very good at building small businesses, because they only do what is relevant and absolutely necessary when it's time to do it. So I do want to support them, and I do want to make sure that they have that support when necessary, when they need to tackle it.
Absolutely. So wait until it kind of gets to a crisis point before actually making a real kind of decision or action on it. So to turn focus back to kind of, I guess, the operations or to the business level of things and looking at ARXA Cyber specifically, I guess, what is the overarching goal? You've spoken about all this work and this need and this challenge MSPs are facing, particularly with the new bill coming in. What is the goal, and where are you going to looking to take the business?
So we're new. We're very, very new. So we're starting off small, and we're starting off as sustainably as we can. What I want to do, my vision, and this might be, I'm not American, I'm Canadian, but my ambitions are quite large, right? I want to be able to provide a network and an infrastructure of support for as many MSPs that need it. Because just like the government saw the MSPs as a force multiplier and that backbone to support their customers, I see cybersecurity as a community service. I see it not just as a career, just not something to do. I'm very passionate about cybersecurity. I'm very passionate about making sure that organizations and people have what they need to secure themselves, because the risks are real. The impacts when things go wrong are very, very real. So I want to have as much impact as I can to secure as many organizations as I can. So my goal, my focus right now with ARXA is to be able to provide that support and to secure and to raise that security posture for MSPs so that they have that knock-on effect for their customers as well. So I have, right now, I'm looking at a handful of slots for MSPs, and that's a now thing. That's a Q4 thing. Come Q1 2026. Definitely looking to expand that. I'm looking for my goal, my vision is to be able to support 1,000 MSPs, right? And that's hugely ambitious. That's I might never get there, but that's where my aim is. That's where I'm hoping to get to. So I want to build out that capability. I want to build out that team. I want to build out that infrastructure so that every MSP who needs that level of support can have it and be able to affect their customers in a way that's going to materially reduce their cyber risks and make sure that they can continue doing what they're doing.
I love that. And I guess the beauty of the model you're building is it is heavily templatized. So you've got that scalability kind of component there without you needing to be the designated CISO in-house, hands-on at like these thousand MSPs. So I love that. And what do you encounter? You touched on kind of already that you're kind of planting seeds, sprinkling them around. MSPs haven't maybe woken up to some of the threats that the bill poses. So I guess lack of awareness could be one problem, but what do you foresee being some of the greatest challenges with achieving this goal, whether it's 1,000 or the kind of the nearer term goals?
It's going to come down to a level of focus and commitment that this can be solved. Because the model isn't new. A virtual CISO, a fractional CISO, a CISO as a service. The model isn't new. It's been around for a really long time. The fact that an MSP can access that there's one designed for them, this is a new idea. So one of the things that I'm running into is that all of the MSPs that I talk to about this say, this is wonderful, this is a great idea, but they need time for it to percolate that, yes, and that works for me, right? And I can use this, right? And so that's probably one of the bigger issues, that because the model is unique, that there's still some socialization that needs to happen, and making sure that people understand how this works for them as an MSP in particular, as designed for MSPs in particular. So that's a little on the new side. And there's also, just like every other organization, there isn't people just hanging about an MSP with nothing to do, with free time to engage with a CISO, a helpful CISO, as helpful as he might be, in order to go as fast as the MSP might need to, right? So there's a velocity issue in terms of what they can do. And so that's one of the things I'm also finding with MSPs. So they recognize the need. They want to engage with me, but they need to go very, very slowly to move forward. And that's one of the other challenges that I'm having. Anything that I can do to anticipate risks way down the road so that I can then start that process as early as possible, so it's not a emergency when the time comes, is a good thing. And that's one of the reasons why I'm focused on the CAF right now. It's not the only thing I'm focused on. I'm not Mr. CAF. It is one risk that I think is easily addressable by all MSPs now, before it becomes a problem. We have lots of time now to be able to then take a look at this one thing. But the CAF is just one issue, right? There's lots of other issues. 98%, I was just reading a report earlier today, 98% of MSPs believe that they need to improve their security posture. 98%. So everybody, right? Everybody knows that they need to improve their security posture. But I believe that a lot of them have this despondency. We don't have time. We don't have the resources. We don't have all the skill sets. We have some skill sets. We're experts in some areas, but not in all of them. And so we're just going to struggle along. We're just going to limp along and do what we need to do. And so providing that resource to them, making sure that they have that time in a way that suits their needs, so they can secure themselves the way they want to secure themselves, making sure that's available. For me, it's community service. It's a means of not just protecting the MSPs, but protecting all of their clients in the wider community.
I think you shed a light on, well, a number of interesting kind of factors there, but one being the kind of that paradox of the first mover advantage. You talked about all this opportunity whereby there's no one else doing it, or at least we don't know yet. Maybe when this goes live, we'll have other people kind of challenging that, but there's no one else really doing this. To your point, 98% of MSPs say that there's a problem. So there's this awareness piece. They know there's a problem, but given the fact that you are a first mover in this space, they can't lump you into a bucket of this is coming out of our SaaS budget, or, this is another SaaS tool, or this is another consultancy engagement. You're one of one. So that's a challenge. Then aligning with busy people who are spending their time doing other things to actually get the time commitment and engagement, and not only put the money where the mouth is, but also commit their time to solving the problem, seems to be another sort of challenge in this sort of evolution.
Exactly. So I'm trying to work with MSPs to look at how I can even, and my company can even, take on some of that work that they're doing, some of that day-to-day work, especially if it can be templated and made into a standard procedure. If I can do that, then that frees them to do other things that I can't do, right? So if we can It's not outsourcing the work. I consider it trading the work, right? Let me do the really, really simple stuff that just needs to get done, right? Treat me like an automated function. There are some bigger stuff that requires more thought, more experience, more hands-on that you could do. And you might be free to do that if I am doing some of these other smaller tasks for you. So I'm looking at how I can provide that level of support to free up the time, to provide more hands, the more doers within that organization to make sure that they are securing what they need to secure and progressing where they need to progress.
And I guess without going down too much of a kind of a psychology sort of rabbit hole, I guess you've overcome some of those kind of cognitive biases or biases around kind of offshore and what offshore means to people, almost looking at it as like an emancipation model. I don't know how you can tie that in, but it's almost like we're taking the workload off you, where you're not kind of sending it off to some offshore location to manage this kind of critical information. We're managing it for you. We've got the time and the expertise and the templates that we can actually do this really quickly instead of you doing it yourself. It sounds like that's kind of one of the obstacles of like how do we position.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's trying to be really responsive to the MSPs. And it's a unique business model. They've got really unique challenges. They don't run like any other business, right? So they've got their own approaches to doing things and their own unique constraints as an industry, right? So it's trying to be listen as much as possible, try to be responsive as much as possible, and try to be creative in how to solve the problems. Because the problems are solvable, right? All of these problems are solvable. It just requires some commitment and even time boxed, like half hour, 45 minutes a day. If we can dedicate that much time, then we can very, very quickly have a program that is rock solid and running like a well-oiled machine.
One thing you've mentioned a number of times in this conversation is community service. And I think I wanted to kind of end and kind of wrap it up with that because I think it's such a lovely thing you've mentioned time and time again. There's a lot of cyber businesses out there that, whether you're looking at MSPs, whether you're looking at consultancy model, a SaaS model that have very healthy profit margins. And whether the goal is like an exit, whether it's to raise a hell of a lot of money, whatever it is, or retain massive profit margins, you've kept coming back to the need and this kind of force multiplier that MSPs are. There's this underserved need, and you see cybersecurity as being a community service. So I guess kind of wrapping up and drawing to a close, Jordan, I'd love to get your kind of final thoughts around the importance of positioning cybersecurity as a community service and what you really mean by that and what it means to how you're kind of baking that into the DNA of the business.
If we take a look at scams, right? If we use scams as a lens for this, we all know the stories about people who have been scammed out of thousands and thousands of pounds. They've had their life savings decimated by criminals. They've had all of these bad things happen. And we as a community, we as a society, we want to make sure that that doesn't happen, not just to us, but to other people, our friends, our family, and these other people. I started working a lot with the Scottish government. I started donating a ton of my time, a ton of my personal time to help the Scottish Cyber Resiliency Unit when it was first starting off. And the head of the CRU at the time asked me, just over coffee, because I was writing papers for them, I was doing so much work for them. He says, "Why are you donating so much time? Why are you doing this?" I think he was concerned that I was going to turn around and give him a bill or something or start asking for payment. And I said, because I live here. Because my wife lives here, my kid lives here. And so the more secure the government is, the NHS is, the schools are, all the services that they depend on, the more secure they are, the more secure my family is, the more secure I am. So the more I can help you, the more secure I am. So it is, on one hand, it's inherently self-serving, right? I want to secure myself by making sure you're secure. That's being very flippant. On the other side, if I can help and I don't, and something bad happens, that's on me, right? If I can help, then let's reduce that risk. Let's put those things in place. Let's have the right ideas at the right time so that we can make sure all of the community, all of society, all of the nation is secure so that we can all move ahead securely, confidently, keep doing what we're doing and not have to be in constant fear that we're going to be losing our life savings to some scammer who came in who just simply wasn't stopped, who was allowed to do what they were allowed to do. And so that's the perspective that I have. And that's the perspective that I bring to ARXA and why ARXA was founded, because we want to provide broad spectrum, as broad of a reach as possible. We're just starting off with MSPs as a focus. There's more focus that's in the longer term plan. But the idea here is to make sure that the UK, Scotland, Edinburgh, where I live, my community, make sure everybody is secure.
I love that. And I think had we recorded this podcast, I don't know, a couple of years ago, a few years ago, people not in the technology sort of domain, and particularly cyber, wouldn't have really had a clue what you're on about, with all due respect. Whereas now, I think everyone's seen things in the news, whether we've been directly affected or indirectly affected by it. So I think what you're striving towards and your goal is something that's going to resonate with a lot more people now. I think it's such a worthwhile mission you're on, and I appreciate you for jumping on here, spending your time, educating all of us, myself included, and sharing the kind of mission and journey you're on. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about my mission.